does that feel?
Is that a little uncomfortable?
It feels a little strange sometimes, right? To be silent or to be in silence. It can feel odd. It can feel sort of like there's something wrong, something's amiss.
Some of you are about to get up and leave. This is not what I came here for.
So we want to talk to you today about silence, right? What is silence? Okay. Silence is a form of communication. It's a tool that we can use, but it's also something that kind of exists.
Let's talk first about how that feels.
Yeah. So does silence feel uncomfortable? Does it feel positive? Does it feel negative? Let's just do a quick show of hands. So, like, who feels like silence is a more positive leaning thing? A lot of you. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Who feels it's an absence, it's more of a negative?
Okay. So what we think about silence, we talked about this, and we sort of asked ourselves, what is silence? And we sort of ended up on different sort of ends of the spectrum. So for me, silence is a more peaceful thing. It's more of a quiet time, a time to reflect, a time to sort of think, a time for me to listen to myself, see what comes up, and to understand what's going on, and sort of try to deal with that. Right? It's a time for me to again reflect, be peaceful, and sort of let the distractions kind of go away. And
I'm more with the negative leaning folks, the more pessimistic viewpoint, if you will. To me, it was initially, my first thought is it's something shared between two people, and so if there's silence, something's missing. If there's an absence, there is a void to be filled. But on the other hand, once you think about it a little bit deeper, especially in relation to two people, it can also be one of the most comfortable things you can share with someone. But then we thought, well, let's not set out to define silence. What do the experts say? What is it actually? What are all the different ways that it occurs in our day-to-day?
Right, so silence, there's multiple definitions for it, right? So it's the complete absence of sound, it's a fact or state of abstaining from speech, it's the avoidance of mentioning or discussing something, state of standing still, not speaking as a sign of respect. So there's sort of these different feelings about silence.
Our favorite, though, was silence is a space that in which sound can exist, sound can take place. It almost as if it gives permission to speech or communication, that it has to be permitted by silence. So we put that all together, our different viewpoints about it, our different impressions paired with all of this, and we quickly realized that silence is actually something completely different than what we originally interpreted it to be.
Right. It can be the space that exists, that's just kind of already there, or it can be something that we use to quiet ourselves or to deliver a sense of communication to someone or to something. And so in that way, it's like there's these different ways that we can interact with silence in our lives. So silence itself is neutral. It's how you achieve it that determines whether it's a positive or negative thing. So who are we?
Before we get into talking to you about silence, let's talk about ourselves a little bit.
Why are we talking about silence? Who are we? My name is Joe Gary, and I've lived in Indy for about 11 years now, so the whole decade, which is kind of crazy. So I'm originally from Chicago, and I moved here, like I said, about 11 years ago. And I love the city. I love being here. I love the community we have. I love a lot of the organizations that we have in town. So it's been a great place to live. I've lived all over the city, up on the north side, Midtown, and now I live in Fountain Square. And it's just been a really, really fun thing. CreativeMornings, I started coming here a couple of years ago, and it's funny being up here now because I never really thought I'll be up on stage. So it's really cool, and I'm really thankful for being up here, and I'm really thankful to the CreativeMornings team for all their hard work and just the invitation to be up on stage. A little bit about me, some of my interests. So I love, if you follow me on Instagram, or if you just know me, I love food and drink. And I talk about it a lot. A lot. That's most of what I talk about on Instagram. So if you have questions about food, I will talk your ear off about it. I love music. I love a lot of the venues we have in town, Hi-Fi, Old National, White River. And so I love going to concerts, traveling for music and attending that. Professionally, I am a financial consultant, so I mostly act in a CFO capacity as a chief financial officer capacity at different companies, helping them manage and oversee their financial departments. And my interest sort of in relationships and dating, I've always had this wild interest about relationships and how people come together and why they do and all the little things that are difficult and all the things that are fun and breaking down all of those sort of components that we experience with people, whether it's friendships, with relationships, whether it's relationships with our the people we work with, coworkers. I've always found that fascinating. I spend a lot of time reading about it. I look at studies. I'll look at journals. I'll watch interviews. I just like spend a lot of time doing that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
All right. My name's Jes Nijjer. I know a lot of you probably from just some coffee shop around town. As most of you know already, I work in photography, conveniently in food and drink, so it's a good excuse to be at a coffee shop all the time. I've actually also been in Indy about the same amount of time. It's a little over like 12 years now. Spent this whole decade here. How about that? I love it here. I've loved having like my adult life here, the more like formative years here. I too love food and drink so much that if you ever encounter us both together, whether you want it or not, you're gonna get a list of like places to go. In fact, we might sit you down and tell you, you know what, you got a date coming up. Here's what you do. We share a lot of interest in food and drink and music and those kind of things. So much so we took a trip about it. Outside of my photography and those kind of hobbies, I love talking. How convenient to be up here. And so I'm like getting into this whole podcasting and interviewing side of things. I love researching people and habits and how and why we do the things we do and how we all pretend like we don't do the thing that we're all doing. I think it's just so beautiful how we trick ourselves. I've loved researching and observing and all these things, and now that we're working on this together, it gives us another outlet to do that. I love, being in Indy. I love traveling out of here too and having like this as a home base to come back to. And I'm ready for another decade here. We'll see how this one goes. Yeah.
So a little bit about how we met. Earlier this year, which is strange because we've been in Indy for about the same amount of time, and yet we knew of each other because we had lots of mutual friends.
Too many mutual friends.
Yeah, too many. Yeah, we'd see each other, and it just got to a point where we'd like be with we'd run into a group of friends, and then she'd be there, and I'd be like, And it was this like strange thing that we've only like really connected over this year. You want to tell the captain story?
Actually, yeah. So we realized our actual origin story is a little different than what Joe remembers, which is probably best for me. We actually met about 2 years ago at a coffee shop, and Joe was sitting next to a window, and there was really good light. And our mutual friend Logan was working there, and I was like, "Hey, Logan, you think this person would mind if I just like took a photo?" And he was like, "Just don't be that guy. Be a decent human about it. Just ask them. Just introduce yourself first, before you just go clicking around town. This isn't Humans of New York, I was like, all right, that's one way to do it." So I went up to him and I was like, "Hey, hi, I'm a photographer. Here's my camera. It checks out. Do you think I could, maybe grab a photo of you sometime?" He was like, "Sure." I was like, "You know what? It's okay. Let's not do it now. Here's a card." And so we became Facebook friends after that. He added me on Facebook. And then from then, that clearly left such a devastating impression. It took 2 years after that before we actually hung out. But eventually the time came, we ran into each other. It was awkward enough for so long that Joe finally one day was like, "All right, we're going to all the same places, just different days of the week. Let's just sync this up." all right, let's sit down, let's talk about food, let's talk about coffee, let's just talk shit. And we did. And then we never looked back.
4 hours.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's like on the shorter end of when we get together now. But it happened.
Just told me the story yesterday, and I completely forgot. Like that was how we met.
That's how bad it was, you guys. Just didn't want to remember it.
No, it wasn't that weird. It was great. But I'm glad we connected, and we're up
Here we are.
talking. Yeah. So silence. Why are we talking about silence? So we, like Jes was saying, we've bonded over food. We've had lots of talks and conversations, and we found out that we had a pretty similar year with respect to dating, and it's just a lot of like really weird timing, like alignments and like similarities, and so like we go get dinner or lunch, and we talk, and it's just like these things would come up, and we keep talking about them, like, oh my God, you've experienced this too, and we're like, is anyone else experienced this? And we have, because we talked about our friends, and it was just something that we just kept, like I said, talking about, that kept coming up, and so we're like, let's do a podcast.
And when we talk about alignment and like a very similar year, it's not just like, oh, you're seeing someone, yeah, me too. Oh, it didn't go well, yeah, me either. No, I mean, like we were at our favorite establishment, Osaka, one fine eve with our good pal Courtney, and we start sharing some anecdotes, and we realize, hold up, did we both just meet people here that moved to the same city, that we then reached out to, that we met up with at the same time, that then ghosted us at the same time? That's the kind of synchronicity I'm talking about. Like, and in the same way too, the same, I'll let you know kind of thing. But yeah, it was too eerily similar, and then we're like, okay, clearly this is like a universal epidemic. Everybody's like experiencing dating in the same way. Dating is like cruel and unusual punishment these days. So if you're doing it, like, kudos to you, because it sucks. But we were like, well, why do it if we can just talk about it? So that's where we're at now. So that's how the podcast was born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about a specific type of silence today. It's a form of silence I think pretty much everyone in this room is familiar with, and it is ghosting. What is ghosting? Actually, before we get into ghosting,
yeah. Actually,
take a quick show of hands.
So, show of hands, just raise your hands, who has ever been ghosted in any way? Yep, that checks out. And if you didn't raise your hand, I promise you have been, you just don't know it yet. You're going to learn today. Everybody, okay, close your eyes real quick.
Yeah.
And no judgment, no one can see you, just me and Joe. Who is guilty of ghosting? Awesome. All right. Open your eyes, put your hands down. You're all guilty of it, by the way. You all raise your hands. Some of you didn't even trust us, so you didn't. But I know you. I see you, Jake Harper. It's okay. So, all of us can relate to this. And at the end of the day, like, what is it really? Why does it happen? We understand so little about that.
Yeah. So, ghosting is breaking. I like this definition a lot. Breaking off a relationship by stopping all communication and contact with the partner without any apparent warning or justification, as well as ignoring the partner's attempts to reach out or communicate.
Which is great, but if you've been ghosted and you read that and I'm like, oh, it's actually this, that doesn't make you feel better. That didn't help at all. It might have made it worse. You might, want to hit me for that.
Right.
And it's not just just to seize communication. It's not just like someone's walked out of your life. There was a choice to communicate something there, and a person chose silence, right? So we feel like it falls more as a miscommunication. There was an opportunity to communicate something, and so a choice was made, and so it's not just that, oh, well, this just doesn't exist anymore, right? Someone is still thinking about that choice that you've made. And it can exist even, there might be someone here thinking, well, you know what, I never had to mess with Tinder, Bumble, etc. I've been in a relationship, happy for a long time, so I'm good. It can exist just in your day-to-day, in your personal relationships, in a marriage, and, with your coworkers, anything. I mean, it can be as simple as like, hey, Joe's everything okay? You know, something wrong? No, nothing. It's fine.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a form of ghosting. Maybe not as severe, but it's just a refusal to communicate something.
Right, and it kind of goes back to that silence. You know, when you ask someone that question, right, or you're wanting some feedback from your boss or whatever, and you don't get it back, and you know something's there because you don't know exactly what it is. It feels weird. The thing still exists, right? You don't get rid of sort of the uncomfortable or the discomfort by ghosting. Right, so it can, like Jes said, it can exist in a relationship, it can exist in, you know, like dating relationship, or it can exist in, you know, work relationship. It can also exist within yourself. You know, like you could come home from work one day and be like, something's up, and distract yourself, you know, from what's going on. So there's lots of ways, lots of applications for it. Delivering silence is a choice, right? So with respect to ghosting, it's a choice because there's some communication happening, right? There's something that's ongoing already, and then there's a decision to cut off the communication, and that's something that's very active. It's not just, you texted me, I didn't text you back. Oh, I had no idea. You know, it's an active thing.
Yeah.
It's an active choice.
I mean, it's something I think we can all pretty much agree we wish would just cease to exist. But in order to stop doing it, we have to first dig a little deeper to understand why we do it to begin with. So a lot of it, so as with everything else we're going to discuss in the podcast and just every conversation we have, it all eventually boils down to communication for us. You know, your relationships are as strong as your weakest communication. So it's all about understanding what it is that you're choosing not to communicate and what's the best way to do so. So what are your intentions, but what's the actual impact you end up having? You know, your intention may be, I don't want to say this, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And yet the impact you've had is you've probably hurt somebody's feelings even a little bit more.
Yeah, it's just like the benefit of the doubt is earned, right? So we have a relationship, right? We understand we could be friends for a long time. We communicate often. So if Jes texts me and I don't respond, she's not thinking like, oh, please just.
This is it. Here goes the podcast. It's solo, you guys.
Right, we have a relationship. She knows something's probably going on. He's probably busy. His phone died. You know, something's going on. But if we just met and I was, you know, let's say we connected at a coffee shop and then I
2 years go by. I'm like,
what's going on, right? Okay, so
we're gonna use something here, a visual tool, to really help drive our point. This will help build our credibility.
Yeah, it's gonna enforce our main argument.
We want to share some videos that we pulled from a deep memory vault. If you don't remember these, please don't tell me, because that probably just means that you're too young, and I don't want to know that. But we want to talk to you about the benefit of the doubt. So let's watch this together. All right, so the point of those is, one, you can't switch to singular anymore. That doesn't exist. But more importantly, no one gave the benefit of the doubt. No one thought, oh, did the call drop? Because these are very new relationships, very new interactions, right? If I call Joe and I say, hey, you know, are we going to provider later? And I don't hear back, I'm like, okay, the call dropped. But if this is 2 years ago, and I'm like, hey, so about those photos, and then I don't hear back, I'm like, you know, professionally, for your work, of course, not to be friends. Why would I want to do that? You know, there's no benefit of the doubt there because there's nothing to build that off of. So, you know, going back to our intentions versus our impact, we know ourselves, we know our intentions, so we think, oh, well, you know, they'll understand. They'll think, oh, maybe they got busy, you know, maybe something came up. Maybe their cat had an injury, you know, she ran away, you know. But you know that about yourself. There's nothing to build that benefit of the doubt off of. And so that's not the impact that you have with someone. You know, we assume the worst in these situations, right? Like, was it me? Did I do something wrong?
Right. So intentions is it's an important thing to think about within ourselves, right? Choosing silence is generally not an act of courage. It's something that we do because it's uncomfortable. Choosing silent it's it's like taking a side, right? It's like communicate. It's like a form of miscommunication. It's instead of saying what we need to say or what we want to say, it's taking it out.
And it's leaving things up for assumption. So the only way you can really communicate whatever it is that you intended is, well, you say it. Otherwise, it's up for me to interpret that however. I mean, we think of that in our political climate these days. We often hear things like, staying silent is choosing a side. We think of that in our, relationships like, well, if this is up for me to interpret, then this is how I will. And often we usually choose the more negative or, the less well-meaning of the options there.
Right. So there's the two ends, right? There's the receiving end of it, right? There's the being delivered silence too. And there's that feeling of, well, why didn't this person just say anything, or why didn't they just tell me what was going on? It's this feeling of like, why wasn't I good enough, but why wasn't I good enough for a response, right? Why didn't I deserve, or
it almost even takes the attention off of the initial issue of like, why didn't I get the job? It's more like, why did you think I couldn't handle a rejection? Why did you think you just couldn't tell me that, or just not waste my time, not leave me guessing? Why was I just not good enough for a response?
Right. And the other side of it, it's the person that's delivering it, right? And what drives that sort of form of miscommunicating? It might be difficult to communicate, right? It might feel weird, like, say this whole thing, I don't want to, it's going to feel awkward, it's going to be too much. You might feel like it's not worth one's time, right? It's just, you know what, I don't need to do that, like, they'll get it, it's not a big deal. It might feel harmless, right? They don't say anything, they'll understand, it's not going to hurt them, it won't be a big deal. But ultimately, it's about not knowing how to communicate something, right? It's about not knowing how to say what should be said or needs to be said, and instead, you're sort of delivering this silence that doesn't make the thing that's left unsaid to go away. It doesn't make that disappear. So dealing with that discomfort, when something's uncomfortable, you can decide to address it or you cannot. And when you do that, when you decide to communicate, it might feel weird, right? For a time.
It might sit with you for a day. It might feel uncomfortable for a week even, Maybe it brings up some other issues. Maybe you're suddenly taking a really hard look at your previous relationships and wondering where are all these patterns coming from? How do I make these choices? So there's going to be discomfort, There's something that we're avoiding, and we wouldn't be avoiding it if it was just, mundane or joyful or anything, just like the everyday. So of course there's discomfort. But what happens is when we deliver silence, when we make those kind of choices, when we just fail to communicate, we think, well, I just sidestepped this. I just outsmarted my discomfort. Look at how easy that was. I just didn't send this text back, dodged it, clear, Actually, no. Not only does that get transferred, it doesn't just dissipate. It's not just, gone in the wind. What you've done is, one, we've transferred that discomfort now to the other person, the one that's wondering what happened, right? And it grows over time, right? The longer you sit with it, the longer you avoid it, more piles on. So every occurrence of miscommunication, every one of those avoidances, it's just piling on. So now it's only getting harder every single time to actually tackle the entire issue.
It's something that you've, again, like Jes said, it's something that you've transferred, it's something you've made someone else's problem. So you might be cool and like, oh, I think we're all good. And then as soon as you see that person, you might be like, you're trying to hope that they forgot about what happened.
In fact, you're probably avoiding them in like a public space and like, oh, Joe, I didn't even see you there. I know there's only 4 people at this coffee shop, but I was just, so deep in my laptop I didn't see you.
So how do we learn to change our communication? How do we learn how to communicate more effectively, right? So we talked through this a little bit, and there's some things that we've talked about that have happened in our own lives that we've thought have been really helpful. And these are sort of things that we use when we're trying to communicate effectively.
And, since we're both wearing, round glasses and all black, you can trust that this is a proven 3-step method. No, but this is really something that was born out of us, like, swapping a lot of stories, a lot of just, like, how do I handle this kind of thing. And then we realized we were both just giving each other the same advice back and forth, which is pretty easy to come to that conclusion when you talk about these kind of things 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. So we realized, like, wait, so what are we actually saying time and time again? Like, it's not just situational. It doesn't change with the person, with, the actual matter I'm addressing. It's always just a very simple point you're trying to make to every person you're coming in contact with.
Right, yeah. We decided it's not like there was some, like, first what you need to do is you need to meditate for about 30 minutes, and then you need to...
Although you probably do.
Yeah, you might need to do that. You might need to do that. It's not this complicated thing that's, that we need to discover, we need to learn. It's something that we need to practice in our day-to-day. And the first thing that we kind of always come back to is, like, we need to convey our feelings honestly. We need to not leave things left unsaid. We need to communicate how we feel. This makes me sort of think back to, it's about like 10 years, it was a little over 10 years ago. I was, dating a girl, and we were like kind of got into a little argument, and she said at one point, she was like, "You're a nonverbal processor." And I was like, no. And it would make me uncomfortable. I was like, I'm not no. I can talk about the thing right now. It's cool. I just just for a sec, because when I just need. I can't answer right now because I need to think, because I am.
And then he processed it non-verbally.
And I had to sit with it for a second, right? And I had to sit with it, and later on, I was thinking about that. Why did that make me feel uncomfortable? She conveyed her feelings honestly, and it was something that was, I don't want to say a sticking point all the time, but it for her it was hard when she wanted to have a conversation, because I'd be like, well, I didn't think about it, and blah 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 blah. And so understanding how we both communicated was super helpful going forward, because when we had these conversations, she'd know, like, oh, he needs to, like, go think about it for like 2 hours, and then he can have a conversation about it.
And on the other end, I mean, up until this year, honestly, I'm so guilty of this, and I'm still trying to work my way through it. But I'm definitely a verbal processor. A lot of my friends here can attest to that. I think while I speak. I surprise myself when I speak sometimes, like, oh, that's how I feel about that. But also what I'm guilty of is I try to cushion whatever I'm saying. When I'm delivering something, when I'm proposing something, I will cushion that with every possible rejection that I think I can handle, so that you just choose one of those. So if it's like, hey, do you want to get a drink Saturday? I'm going to cushion it with, but if you're working, or it's the holidays, maybe you have something with your family, that's totally okay. I fully understand. Or if you it just maybe not right now. Let's just wait until after the holidays. Suddenly, this text is pointless. We're not even making plans. Why did I say any of this at all? When the real point to be made was just, hey, I would love to see you. Let's grab a drink, right? And then just balls in their court. Leave it to them. If we're all just only communicating what we actually want to say, first of all, that takes the weight off of like half the conversation for you. Now you're not, spending an extra 10 minutes in the shower, like practicing this conversation, and then I'll say this, and then, they'll say that. You're just trying to communicate what you want to say. How refreshing is that? And you're also not worrying about, how are you going to manage their response? We're just responsible for our own feelings. And that's just a good, healthy boundary to have, whether it's with your friends or in a personal relationship. Only worrying about how am I dealing with my emotions.
Right. We've all had the feeling of scheduling something with someone, right? Where it's just meet up, and then they're like, hey, actually, I'm so sorry, like, my car blew a tire, I'm just not going to be able to make it, and we're like, totally forgot, and we're like, oh yeah, if you can't make it still today, I'm fine, man, that's fine. Yeah. So just let me know when you can. Yeah. But yeah, not trying to control the response, and making sure that we're communicating, honestly with each other, right? Because when we do that, there's nothing left unsaid. Then we don't feel that weird, discomfort or that uncomfortableness, because all the things that we wanted to say, we've said, right? We've communicated, we've left out there. We're not trying to control the response. We want to hear what their response is. And that's, again, like Jes said, it's we have to think about what our responsibility is. We have to maintain that boundary of what's our responsibility in this conversation and in my communication, and what's theirs. Right? We're not responsible for sort of trying to untangle for them what their response is going to be. You know, they'll work through that, and the conversation can continue how it will. So you might go, "That's cool, Jess.
Sounds great.
That sounds great." Like,
but
thanks
nah.
for breaking it down, but not into it. Because when you're communicating with someone, and you tell someone, if you're on the other end of it, right? If someone tells you something, you're like, I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to deal with that.
It's a little personal. I don't really like that.
Right. So how do you deal with the response, right? Especially if it's something like rejection, right? If you get an email, you know, we've moved on to other candidates. If you ask someone on a date and they say no, right? A lot of times that's why we downplay or we try to control responses, because we don't want to be hurt. We don't want to feel that thing that feels weird, that rejection feeling. So you might say, that was all great information, but what do we do about rejection? What do we
Maybe
do
I'd
about
just
that?
rather be ghosted, so I can just choose whichever narrative I like better in this situation.
Right.
You know, maybe they had to move. They had to flee the country, and that's why I didn't hear back. It's not me. The date didn't go poorly at all. It's, you know, family situation.
Right. So that's not something we're going to talk about today here, because we're pressed for time. But we will be talking about it on our podcast.
Absolutely. There's going to be a whole episode on rejection. A whole nother one on ghosting, because believe it or not, this is about 10% of what we wanted to talk about today. And then we started to rehearse for one of our friends, and we were like, oh, okay, no, so it's already been an hour. Well, let's take out these 75 slides. So there's so much more to say here. I would have you all here till 5 p.m. with just like a half-hour lunch break if I could.
Need all-day conference. The one thing we do want to know from you, guys, is what's something that you wish you know how to communicate, right? Or wish you know how to communicate better. It's something that you struggle with communicating, that you want some feedback on. You're curious as how to go about this situation. You might go, okay, I know about if I'm talking with my friends or if it's with my family, but what about this other situation? Like, what do I do, or how do I do that? Or if I feel this way, is that okay? Is that normal? So on our Instagram stories right now, if you go to our Instagram, you have to follow us first, obviously, to do that.
You don't have to, but you should.
Yeah, you should. We have this question as a sticker. So, yeah, we'd love to hear from you what types of things that you'd like to communicate better.
So anytime today, throughout the day when you get a chance, tell us, you know, what's something you wish you knew how to communicate or communicate better. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to answer all of these. Every single one.
Yep. So, please do that when you get time. On the podcast, you might think, we've gotten this question. We've both gotten this question. But what are we going to talk about? What kind of topics? Is it just going to be like us just talking about, like, oh, this person sucked and this person sucked and that was weird? And
there might be some name dropping. There might be some call outs. Who knows? Who knows what could happen? You know, it might just depends on how many cups of coffee we've had that day. If Joe's had, 2+. Who knows what's gonna happen?
I do not drink coffee, so when I do drink coffee, I'm on drugs, basically.
It's wild, y'all.
So
so here's the thing: there's someone in here, sitting here, thinking, "Oh my God, why didn't they look at this?" Oh, we did. This is what dating looks like. This is what it's like when we get to talking about it, and when we're like, you know what, let's just forget the whole thing. Let's just not even do this. You know what? It's hopeless. This is what it feels like. So, I mean, these are all things we're going to talk about. Some together, some, separately, because they just require so much attention. But this is just a rough idea. If you're just like, if you hadn't even heard about the podcast until today, if you're you don't know us, you're completely unfamiliar. This is maybe just a little sliver of the things we're going to get into.
Yeah, we'll be talking about something, and then we'll be like, what is that? What would you call, what is that little, what's that part of it, though?
Yeah.
Because it's not just connection, it's just, it's attunement. And now what do you think of it? How would you define that? Oh, interesting, because I came from it this angle. So, I'm a data-driven person. I like to, I want structure, and then I dive in as far as possible. And then I'm like, okay, now I understand.
I can attest to this to the point that we went to New York just to like eat our way through for a week, and we had morning meetings in which Joe would pull out a spreadsheet and say, okay, so we hit these 3 spots yesterday. We need to catch up. You know, we're gonna fall behind if we don't go to 6 places today. Like there was a spreadsheet, y'all.
Yeah. Morning meeting every morning, 6 days.
Yeah. And if there's something you want to hear about that you're like, oh, I don't see it up here, you know, I don't even know if this is like other people experience, just let us know.
Let us know.
We want to talk about all of it, you know, and if it's like, oh wow, I've never heard that from anyone before, we'll research it, we'll talk about it anyway.
Yeah. Like I said, we're always talking about this stuff anyway. I'm listening to interviews and reading research papers, and yeah, so it's something that it's constantly on our minds.
Yeah.
But so right now, other than the question we said to answer on our Instagram stories, feel free to ask us anything, whether it's just about